I am the program coordinator at Down Syndrome Indiana, and so I'm so excited to be able to talk to you about Down syndrome. Just so you know a little bit about me, I have only been at Down Syndrome Indiana for about 5 years now, and this is my daughter Lily, who's pictured there. Lily is 8 years old, and she's the reason I got involved with DSI. And I'll refer to it as DSI very frequently. So we got involved with Down Syndrome Indiana when Lily was born. We didn't know that Lily was going to have Down syndrome, so it came as quite a shock to us. And within about the first 24 hours of her life, we got information and resources about Down syndrome and about Down Syndrome Indiana. And so it was really wonderful to have that information from them. So tell you a little bit more about DSI. So Down Syndrome Indiana is a nonprofit, and our mission is to enhance the lives of individuals with Down syndrome and their families. We advise, we educate, we encourage, connect, include, and advocate. And we want to see a future where everybody is able to live a happy, healthy, and productive life, right? That's all any of us want for our children and for the world, really. We want everybody to be able to be happy and productive. At DSI, we serve individuals with Down syndrome. We serve their families, medical professionals, educators, direct support staff, really anybody who wants to know more about Down syndrome. We provide services to 44 counties throughout central Indiana. So all of those counties in yellow on that map of Indiana there to the right. It ends up being about a third of the state from a geographical perspective. And all of the other colors that are represented on that map are other Down syndrome organizations. So every county in Indiana is covered by a Down syndrome organization. And we all communicate and talk, but there's no like overarching governing body that controls us. We all operate independently, but we all have very good relationships. So if somebody, say from Evansville, called and needed help or resources, I would do the best I could to provide them with that help and resource. And then I would make sure that they were able to get in contact with their local organization, because getting that local support is so incredibly important. We like to consider ourselves a one-stop shop for information and resources related to Down syndrome. We offer new parent packets, which I think is one of the most important things that we do. Like I said, that was the way that I got introduced to Down Syndrome Indiana. So those Down syndrome, or those new parent packets rather, are given to parents, to medical providers, to labor and delivery departments at hospitals, and they're provided at no cost. It includes information on Down syndrome clinics, healthcare guidelines, information about first steps, Medicaid waiver system, and lots of other little pieces. We also offer one-on-one connections through our First Call program. So a new parent can call and say, hey, I really want to talk to another parent who's been here, who's done this, and we'll match them up. We have over 60 parents who are trained to be kind of mentor parents, and we match those new families up with a mentor family based on whatever's important to them. So for some families, that might be somebody who is close from a geographical perspective. For other families, they might want to talk to somebody whose child has a particular medical diagnosis, or maybe who has a particular family situation. So we do our best to make that fit whatever that family needs. We also have about 11-ish community groups, and those are support groups that operate throughout central Indiana. We have several groups that are what I would call geographically based groups. So we have a group in Terre Haute, a group in Lafayette, a group up in Cass County, a group on the west side of Indianapolis, a group up in Madison and Hancock counties. And then we also have what I would term more identity-based groups. So we have a group for moms of individuals with Down syndrome. We have a group for dads of individuals with Down syndrome, a group for self-advocates, which is an adult with Down syndrome. That's how we refer to our adults with Down syndrome. We have a group for teenagers with Down syndrome, another group for parents of children with Down syndrome who speak Spanish. We have a group for our Black families. Basically, all of those community groups are led by parent volunteers who are members of that community. So they are able to identify whatever that particular community needs as far as support and engagement. Some of our groups do really fun, family-friendly activities. Other groups have trainings and learning opportunities. Some of them meet monthly, some of them meet every other month, or just a couple times a year. We do a lot of educational programs at Down Syndrome Indiana. We do tons of outreach. So we do presentations like this, presenting to our community. We also present to educators on how to support students with Down syndrome in the classroom. We present to students about inclusion and acceptance and why being friends with somebody with Down syndrome is so cool. We do presentations to medical professionals on how to present a Down syndrome diagnosis in the kindest, most beneficial way for that family. We do a lot of fun family-friendly activities. I should qualify that with pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, we had a big summer picnic every year. We have a big holiday party. We have a hayride in October, a lot of really great events. We've had to change those a little bit because of the new restrictions with social distancing, but we're still getting our families together as often as we can, virtually when possible. Our biggest and largest scale awareness event and activity is our Buddy Walk. So October 31st, we have the Buddy Walk. Typically, that is at White River State Park downtown. We have about 3,000 to 5,000 people who attend that. It is an amazing day celebrating people with Down syndrome. Unfortunately, because of COVID this year, we had to move that walk to a virtual setting. So if you're interested in participating virtually, follow Down Syndrome Indiana on Facebook, and we're gonna share a lot of information on October 31st. So we hope you can join us. Down Syndrome Indiana covers, like I showed you earlier, a really, really big coverage area. We cover 44 counties, and we actually have a really, really small staff. We have 2 full-time staff, and then we have a handful of part-time staff. So we have a great group of individuals, but it's not a lot of people to do the amount of stuff that we do. So we're really, really dependent on volunteers, and we're always grateful for anybody who wants to get involved with our organization. So if that sounds like something you might enjoy, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. So let's talk about the reason that we're actually here, which is you want to know more about Down syndrome. So Down syndrome is the most commonly diagnosed genetic condition in the United States. There are about 350,000 to 400,000 people in the US who have Down syndrome, about 7,000 to 8,000 people in the state of Indiana. Down syndrome was named for the person who first kind of categorized the condition back in 1862. So it wasn't named for the way people with Down syndrome look or the way that people with Down syndrome act. It was named for John Langdon Down. In America, we do say Down syndrome. There's no apostrophe S on the end because Dr. Down didn't have Down syndrome. So we would only add the apostrophe S if it was a syndrome that he had. So it is just Down syndrome. People with Down syndrome have a 3rd copy of the 21st chromosome. So I don't know about you guys, but I learned a lot in high school biology, and not a lot of it stuck with me. So I'm going to tell you a little bit. Hopefully it won't be too basic for you guys, but bear with me. So most of us, I would imagine that most of us on this call have 46 chromosomes in every cell in our body. So we get 23 chromosomes from mom and 23 chromosomes from dad, and they pair up. So we have 23 pair of chromosomes in every cell in our body, giving us a total of 46. At the very earliest stages of cell division, for some reason, we don't know why, a person with Down syndrome gets 1 extra chromosome at chromosome 21. So they have 3 copies of the 21st chromosome, giving them 47 instead of the 46. And it's that extra chromosome that's responsible for some of the differences that we see in people with Down syndrome. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. We'll talk a little bit more about some of those differences. But one of the things that I had no idea about before my daughter was born is that there are different types of Down syndrome. I just thought Down syndrome is Down syndrome, but they're actually different types. 95% of the people that you meet with Down syndrome will have trisomy 21. And a person with trisomy 21 has 3 copies of the 21st chromosome in every cell in their body. The rarest form of Down syndrome is called mosaic Down syndrome. It happens in 1 to 2% of the people that you meet with Down syndrome. And somebody with mosaic Down syndrome, they have a 3rd copy of the 21st chromosome in some cells, but not all. And then translocation happens in 3 to 4% of the people that you meet with Down syndrome. And those folks have a 3rd copy of the 21st chromosome that actually attaches to a different chromosome. And so the interesting thing about translocation Down syndrome is that's actually the only type of Down syndrome that can be inherited. What does that mean? Basically, it means that something in mom or dad's genetic composition makes their children more likely to have Down syndrome. Again, we don't really know what, but, or actually scientists might, I don't really know what. But basically it means that if I have a child with Down syndrome, and I do, and that child has trisomy 21, and she does, and I choose to have more children, my future children are not at an increased risk of having Down syndrome. They don't have an increased chance of having Down syndrome because my first baby has Down syndrome, because trisomy 21 is not hereditary. There's no hereditary component. If my daughter had translocation, then it would put me at an increased likelihood of having another child with Down syndrome in the future. So just an interesting tidbit. Another thing that I think is really interesting that I didn't know is that most babies with Down syndrome are actually born to women between the ages of 18 and 35. And I know whenever I say this, people are like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. But it's absolutely true. It's also true that women over the age of 35 are at an increased likelihood of having a baby with Down syndrome. So the older you get basically over your lifetime, the older you get, the more increased that likelihood gets, right? But the reality is that more women between the ages of 18 and 35 are having babies than women over the age of 35. So statistically speaking, they're going to have more babies with Down syndrome. So I have found in my own life that that's very true. I was under 35 when my daughter was born. Most of the friends I have who have a child with Down syndrome were under that age as well. So don't assume just because someone has a baby with Down syndrome that they were of advanced maternal age. So let's talk about some of those characteristics that people with Down syndrome have, because there are some very common characteristics. And this picture, by the way, is of my daughter. That's Lily. We took that, I think, back in March, or maybe it was February. So it's less than a year old. So people with Down syndrome tend to have almond-shaped eyes. So their eyes are shaped a little bit differently. People with Down syndrome tend to be a little bit shorter in stature compared to their typically developing peers. People with Down syndrome also tend to have a single crease across the palm of their hand, whereas a lot of us have 2 main creases. People with Down syndrome also tend to have a flat or absent nasal bridge. People with Down syndrome tend to have an intellectual disability as well. That basically just means that it takes people with Down syndrome a little bit longer to learn things that you or I might be able to pick up pretty quickly. Doesn't mean that people with Down syndrome can't learn, because they can. They can learn lots of things and are very smart. They just have to work really hard to learn those things. But people with Down syndrome overall are more like us than they are different. And I don't know if you noticed, but every one of those characteristics that I mentioned, and there are a lot of other characteristics that doctors can pick out, but every one of those characteristics, I said, people with Down syndrome tend to, meaning that not everyone with Down syndrome exhibits all of those traits. Just like us with 46 chromosomes, people with Down syndrome are all unique and different and individuals. So you will meet individuals with Down syndrome who are 6 feet tall. You will meet individuals with Down syndrome that have 2 creases on their palm. People with Down syndrome are very different and unique, just like all of us. Whenever we're talking about Down syndrome and just disability in general, I think that it's really important to talk about disability etiquette. And in the Down syndrome community, the preferred language to use when referring to a person with Down syndrome is people first or person first language. So we want to put the person before the disability. So instead of the Downs kid or the Down syndrome kid, we're going to say the kid with Down syndrome. Instead of the wheelchair guy, we're going to say the guy who uses the wheelchair, right? You get it. We want to put the person before the disability. And why is it important that we do that? Why do we want to use people first language? And really, it's all about respect. We want to acknowledge that that person is more than a label or more than a disability, that they are a person first and foremost. If I was going to tell you about my daughter, I would tell you that Lily is silly and smart and funny and kind and caring and stubborn. I could say that like 1,000 times and probably not convey to you the level of stubbornness which she may have gotten from me. She is a diva and she's amazing. And I could go on and on telling you about Lily. And at some point I would get to the fact that she has Down syndrome, because she does. It is a part of who she is, but that's all it is. It's just one single tiny part of this amazing person. So when you call her the Down syndrome kid or the Down syndrome student, it's like you're putting her in this box that has a Down syndrome label on it. And you're saying the only thing that's important about this person is that diagnosis, is that label. And when you do that, you miss out on all the other amazing traits that she has to offer. So person first or people first language is a really great way to empower people with disabilities and acknowledge they are more than that label. Now, I will tell you that, like in every other aspect of life, people in the disability community have many varying opinions on the right type of language to use. There are plenty of people within the disability community who do prefer disability or identity first language, particularly people from the autism community. So those folks might tell you that they want to be known as the autistic person, as an autistic girl. And what I would tell you is that, again, disability etiquette is all about respect. It's about making that person feel respected. So if an individual asks you to refer to them in a particular way, absolutely defer to them, because they truly are the expert on disability and on themselves. So absolutely defer to the preference of that individual. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about Down syndrome now that we've gotten the disability etiquette component out of the way. So what kind of things should you know about Down syndrome? Well, one, people with Down syndrome really are more like us than they are different. They're all unique and different and individual in all the same ways that we are, right? Like there are things that I'm really, really good at and other things that I'm really, really struggling with, right? All of us have those things that we need extra help with. And people with Down syndrome are no different. There are aspects of their life where they are amazing and they're so great and they're really strong. And then other aspects of their life where they need a little extra help and support. So just like us, people with Down syndrome are unique. People with Down syndrome have the same wants, needs, and desires as all of us. You know, they want to have friends, they want to be loved, they want to be included, just like you or I. People with Down syndrome, oh, I hear this all the time. I hear people say, oh, adults with Down syndrome are like little kids trapped in an adult body. I'm like, it's so sad. That's not actually true though, right? That's not true. Adults with Down syndrome are adults in an adult body with adult thoughts and feelings and emotions. So it's very important that you treat an adult with Down syndrome like an adult. I think that some of the reason that adults with Down syndrome get that stereotype, if you will, is because a lot of adults with Down syndrome like very childish things like coloring or watching Disney movies or dressing up at Halloween. And absolutely everyone who likes any of those things is a little kid, right? No, I'm just kidding. I love all of those things. And that doesn't make me less of an adult because I like those things. I think sometimes people also feel like adults with Down syndrome are like little kids because adults with Down syndrome need a lot of help and support to do things. They might need somebody to help them with their doctor's appointments, to help them with their medical care. They might need someone to help them with finances or help them with cooking. But I would challenge you to really stop and think about your life. There are very few of us in this world, and I say us, very few people, because I'm not one of them, very few people in the world who are truly 100% independent, who don't rely on the support of others. I definitely am someone who relies on the support of others. There are things that if I had to be good at them to be considered an adult, then consider me a child, because I'm horrible at it. I'm horrible with money. I'm horrible with budgeting, like absolutely abysmal. My husband does all of that stuff for us because I know that I need his help. If I have a really big, important medical appointment, I very often will take someone with me to serve as another set of ears to ask questions that I might not think about. When I have big decisions that I need to make, I talk to my mom, I talk to my friends, I rely on a lot of other people to help me get through the day. And that doesn't make me less of an adult. It just makes me smart. It means that I rely on my support system. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And adults with Down syndrome are the same way. They just have to rely on their support system when there are areas they need a little extra help. Another really common misperception that I hear frequently is that people with Down syndrome are happy all the time. Like generally, if I tell a stranger that I have a daughter who has Down syndrome, they'll say, "Oh my gosh, she must be happy all the time." And I'm like, "No, like what planet do you live on? Like, is there anyone who's happy all the time?" No. People with Down syndrome, they are really happy. They're also really frustrated. They get really angry. They get really embarrassed. They get really sad. All of those things that we feel, a person with Down syndrome feels as well. I know a lot of adults with Down syndrome who have really struggled since the coronavirus epidemic started, when they had to change their routines, when they weren't able to get out there and see their friends and go to their jobs. They really had some significant issues, just like most of us did, right? We all really struggled with that. So people with Down syndrome have this huge range of emotions that we all have. But sometimes people with Down syndrome might display those emotions. They might express them a little bit differently than you or I might. But again, I think that's pretty typical, right? Like we all have our own way of expressing our emotions. Like when I'm really, really excited and happy, I might like clap my hands and jump and scream, while someone else might just sit there and smile and keep it all in. We all express things a little bit differently anyway. So this is actually my last really big slide, but I want to talk about all of these things a little bit. And then I would love to just chat and get your guys' thoughts and find out what you want to know more about. But I've taught you a little bit about Down syndrome now. Hopefully you might know a little bit more than you did coming into this call 30 minutes ago. But what can you do moving forward to make life better for people with Down syndrome, to help with Down Syndrome Indiana's mission? And here are some of the things that I came up with when I was pondering that question. First and foremost, be friendly. If you see an individual with Down syndrome, say hello, be kind. It's really important that you talk to the person with Down syndrome rather than their parent or caregiver who might be with them. You can introduce yourself just like you would to any other person. Try to avoid stereotyping. So, now that adults with Down syndrome aren't little kids. You know that not everyone with Down syndrome is happy. So avoid making those stereotypical mistakes and let other folks know if they are using stereotypes. Let them know, like, hey, I don't think that's really true. encourage the people you know to use person first language and to really be mindful of the way that they're referring to people with Down syndrome. I hadn't talked about this yet, but one of the things that I find really irksome is when people say someone suffers from Down syndrome, right? People don't suffer from Down syndrome. They don't. That's just, it's not a thing. People suffer from a lot of other stuff. They suffer from medical conditions. They suffer from, a lot of different health related things. But Down syndrome itself is not something that is cause for suffering. My daughter is like the poster child for this really awesome statistic that's out there. So there was a gentleman named Dr. Brian Scotko who did a study, and he interviewed folks with Down syndrome. And what he found was that 99% of people with Down syndrome that he surveyed are happy with their lives. I think 96% or 96 or 97% were happy with how they looked. And then the other percentage, 96 or 97, they were happy with who they were. That's an amazing statistic. And my daughter Lily is the poster child for that. She cannot walk by a mirror or a window or any reflective surface without stopping to check herself out because she loves herself some Lily. She is amazing and she's so confident, and she just, oh my gosh, it's awesome. It's amazing. And she's not suffering because of Down syndrome at all. So encouraging people to use person-first language and appropriate disability etiquette is awesome. Also, make sure that you are getting the R word out of your vocabulary. I'm going to use the terminology that is not appropriate, but I want you to know what the R word is in case some of you are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So, long time ago, back when I was a kid, the term for someone who had an intellectual disability, that term was mental retardation. That was the official medical diagnosis. But people took that term and they turned it into a slang word that means stupid or dumb or ridiculous. It became very derogatory. And so people throw that word around a lot. Sometimes people use it just as a synonym for stupid, dumb, or ridiculous in their vocabulary, and they're not talking about someone. Other times, people use it to insult someone, to call them stupid, dumb, or ridiculous. And regardless of the context in which somebody's using that word, it's a horrible word, and it's very hurtful to individuals with disabilities. I know as a mom to someone with an intellectual disability, when I hear someone use that word, it's like a knife to my heart. Oh, it hurts my heart. So if that's a word that's in your vocabulary, I beg you, get rid of it. Make a conscious effort to stop. If other folks in your life use that word, ask them to find a different word, because you never know who around you might love someone with an intellectual disability. It really is very hurtful. Talk to your kids, to your friends, to your family about what you've learned about Down syndrome and help to spread awareness. If you see someone with Down syndrome being mistreated, stand up for them. Really think inclusively. What can you do within your life to include people with Down syndrome in programs that already exist? 20 years ago, there was this huge movement to create separate programs for people with disabilities, like a separate program at church, like a special needs ministry, a separate music class at school. We wanted to have all of these special things for people with disabilities. And frankly, I think those programs, they're okay. But why can we not just welcome those folks into those programs that already exist? If you have a small group at church, could you invite a parishioner who has Down syndrome to be part of that group and participate with you? If you have a book club, could you invite your friend with Down syndrome to participate in that book club with you? Right? Why couldn't you invite them to be part of that? So really think about how you can include people with Down syndrome in every aspect of your life. And then if you have employment, if you have a job, if you are a business owner, what could you do to consider employing someone with Down syndrome or another disability at your place of business? Do you have room to hire someone, maybe part-time, a couple hours a week? I would caution you though, it needs to be meaningful employment. Nobody with Down syndrome wants to be given a job because they have Down syndrome. They want to be given a job that they can be successful at, and they want to have the right supports, but they want to have a job with purpose, a job that is important, that makes a difference in your business and in the lives of their coworkers. So if your business doesn't have the ability to be able to hire someone, could you host a volunteer with Down syndrome to come in and help at some aspect of your business? If you have a business and that's something that you're thinking, oh, that sounds really cool, I'd love to think more about it, you are welcome to reach out to Down Syndrome Indiana, and we're happy to brainstorm with you, and we can come in and do a presentation on Down syndrome to your employees. We can try and help match you up with potential employees with Down syndrome if that's something you're interested in. We are here to serve you. So that is a very quick Down syndrome 101, kind of the nitty gritty about Down syndrome and how to support people with Down syndrome in the community. And my name again is Stephanie Garner, and I'm the program coordinator at Down Syndrome Indiana. My contact information is up here on this slide.
I want to just say that that was fantastic. Stephanie, that was so amazing. So much fantastic information. I love the fact that you talk about person first language, because that's so important. People are so much more than just their disability. Like, that's a piece of your puzzle, but that's not the entire puzzle. And so love that, and love the fact that you're talking about eliminating those stereotypes and thinking about how we are more alike than we are different. And so that was a really, really powerful little package of information that you just gave us. So we have people in the chat box. Jody says she's very thankful for such a great training and informative session. Tom said so much amazing information. Thank you. I know that I did write down one question. So you said that you showed the map, and you said that there are multiple organizations around the state. So if someone was in an area that isn't covered by Down Syndrome Indiana, could they reach out to you to get connected to their local agency? Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. So we get calls and requests for information from people all over the state, just because I think our name is a little bit of a misnomer. Because we're the largest group, we get a lot of calls, and so that's fine. We want to help everybody. We'll send a new parent packet to whoever asks for it. We'll give help and information and resources, but it's really important for families to have local connections. I know for me as a mom, like that, getting that Down syndrome diagnosis is very overwhelming and can be a kind of isolating experience. It's sad. You go through this grieving process. And for me, I really started to heal and accept that diagnosis as I started to meet other families. So we definitely want to make sure that all parents, whether they're new parents or they've been at this a while, we want to make sure that they have good local connections so that they have plenty of support.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Okay, so it sounds like we've got someone listening who works with individuals with disabilities, trying to get them job opportunities, and it sounds like they have an employer who's coming up with excuses not to bring the individuals with disabilities back to work. I'm guessing maybe because of COVID restrictions. They're using maybe COVID restrictions to not bring those individuals with disabilities back to in-person work. And it's a great question and a tough one. I don't know that I have 100% great answers, but I think it depends on the excuses that they have. I know that we at Down Syndrome Indiana, we have so many phenomenal volunteers that typically come into our office and volunteer every day. And we haven't brought those volunteers back yet because our office is really, really small and we don't feel like we can socially distance, and it makes us nervous. And what we're seeing from the research shows that individuals with Down syndrome over the age of 40 are at increased risk for having severe COVID. So we've been really cautious with that and are trying to err on the side of caution. But I know plenty of businesses that have brought their individuals with Down syndrome back with the right precautions. So I think figuring out what their issue is, I definitely think that if they're bringing their other employees back, then they probably owe it to that individual with Down syndrome to give them that opportunity as well. But
Stephanie, thank you so much. This was so fantastic, super informative. I learned tons of new things. And so I really, really appreciate you and appreciate the work that you're doing for individuals in our community.
well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Being here, I really appreciate it.
Awesome. And I encourage you guys, if you have any questions, reach out to Stephanie. I know that I've had to ask her a number of questions in the past, and she's just super knowledgeable and fantastic. So if you have any other follow-up or anything like that, you can always reach out to me. I can connect the two of you. And thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you in a future webinar opportunity.